Okay, let's get going, everybody. Welcome to the Chasey Partners webinar. Today, assess and manage your automation to add value. My name is Lee. Just want to make it very clear before I hand you over to our two experts that we like questions. So if you do have any questions, if you could please just drop them down in the chat function below, that would be absolutely brilliant. And lastly, just to let you know that we will have three polling questions. And what you'll be is prompted on the screen with a QR code. If you just put your mobile phone, point it at the screen with your camera function on, and it'll prompt you, a question will come up on the screen and it'll prompt you to give your answer. Obviously, the more answers we get, the better the engagement, the better responses we can give, and the better webinar that we'll have. So that's about it from my side. I'm just going to share screen with everyone, and I'll hand you over to Ema and Chewy.
Okay, thank you, Lee. A couple of quick introductions. So I'm Ema O'Kelly. I'm the Regional Director for EMEA for Chasey Partners. Background, I've been involved in change in all my jobs. I started as a finance person some time ago, have worked as finance director, CFO, worked with shared services, worked with transformation, and now spending more and more time working with automation. So I'm based in Europe. I'll hand over to my colleague, Chewy, who's...
Thanks, Emer. Thanks, Emer. And welcome, everyone. Super excited to be here. Very happy and very glad to be sharing today with you this webinar. I'm Chewy Michel. I lead the automation practice for Chasey Partners. Been doing this over the last 3 years. Very close to automation and automation technologies over the last 7 years. And I look forward to this webinar.
Okay, so we can see the agenda we're going to go through here. We'll go through it in sections. As Lee says, we have three sets of questions during this, and we would very much appreciate your participation in that. Let's go down through the next couple of pages, Lee. Okay, so a quick rundown on the services that we talk about. Chasey Partners is an advisory service. You know, we start with the transformation end of activity, and then we work through the automation, digitalization, and ultimately we can provide a level of business process outsourcing as well. We're part of a larger company that is a business process outsourcer, but the Chasey Partner focus has been on transformation leading to automation, transformation, optimization. That's really where our core strength is and our focus is. If we look at the next page, we got some examples of the clients we've worked with. You can see various industries, various locations, and a subset of them where we've got digital technology and RPA, particularly with the likes of there's some big companies in there: PepsiCo, Bimbo, Alicor, etc. And we'll talk about some examples of those perhaps later on. You can see though a wide range of industries, a wide range of locations, and a wide range of challenges within those. So let's move on to the agenda. Okay, so we're looking at, oops, we've gone one too far. So we're looking at RPA and hyperautomation. Okay, a quick definition of the bridge between the two. RPA, we're talking about the application of technology to automate or replace human activities, ones that are repetitive, rules-based, manual, often difficult or a drudge to do. Hyperautomation is a level beyond that, where we're looking at mixing various automation technologies with business analytics, AI, machine learning, etc., to raise the level of performance beyond simple RPA. There's a lot of benefit we got from RPA itself, but we're going to look here at the where we can go after that in terms of hyper automation. So Chewy.
Yeah. So as you said, thanks, Emer. As you said, RPA is your basic. How do you look after repetitive, routine, mundane tasks, get them automated? very focused on enabling automation in your back office across your finance, your HR, your procurement, and your IT processes. But once you automate the basics and you want to take your automation program to the next level, you need to look after hyperautomation. Hyperautomation is actually C-level executives across many companies, CIOs, CTOs are looking after how do you take automation to the next level in the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, integrating with business process management tools. Analytics is very important. How do you create a business intelligence level on the top of your automation program to make sure that you are tracking progress towards more end-to-end automation, or something, a new word that I want you to keep in mind, which is intelligent process automation, and I'll talk to it a little bit later during the webinar. When we think about automating, you want to make sure that you remember the word heat maps. So heat maps is something that we've learned through time, and it's across major business enterprise processes, such as human resources, finance and accounting, and information technology. We are going to find places where you have low opportunity for automation, and those are tasks and those are activities that require human intervention, require human judgment. And there will be other places where, due to the transactionality, due to the repetitive nature of those activities, have higher potential for automation. So make sure that as you go about your discovery, as you go about discovering those places that you want to automate, or places where you want to scale your automation program, always use heat maps as a mechanism to help you. There are other heat maps, right? So this is a very generic heat maps. There are others that are even more specific. So for example, in the next chart, you are able to see that human resources, right? Human resources has its own heat map, where you can see, for example, that all of these boxes in green or yellow have higher potential for automation. We've done several projects with several clients where uploading employee data, master data, managing that, the life cycle of the employee data in the system, it's typically a bot that is able to handle that.
We hit some of the big areas, finance, HR, IT at the front. We dived into HR a little bit more detail, but this is just to make you aware that it extends beyond that. You know, we got procure to pay here. We have sales and marketing. The same approach can be applied to a wide range of functions. Okay, anywhere where there's a task which it can be rules based and repetitive. It is a candidate for automation. It's a candidate for benefit. It's a candidate for saving. You know, ultimately, we're looking to provide better service and better cost. But this is just highlighting two other areas as examples where automation is also applicable. So please don't think of it just as the major items of finance or HR or IT, particularly finance or HR. It goes wider than that.
Yeah, and that's key, Emer, since more and more we see organizations moving automation capabilities from the back office to the middle office to the front office. So even enabling sales guys to sell more by saving time of sales guys that typically spend part of their day doing manual tasks, administrative tasks. So we're seeing more automation moving to the front office to enable sales to sell more.
Okay. So it's time for a question. Can we see a barcode? There we go. So if you'd like to grab the barcode.
So yeah, no doubt, Emer, that finance and accounting, from a payables, from a receivables perspective, from an invoice posting perspective, cash applications point of view, finance and account remains top. We're seeing, and I'm glad to see procurement growing up. right? Actually, one of the most recent projects, we are helping companies to connect better with suppliers through automation and creation of automated POs. It's one of the top automations that we've been dealing with in the past. So discovery, right? There's no way automation programs are going to be able to scale without proper discovery. And you can hit it from multiple vendors and from multiple experts in the industry through different terms. In Chasey, we use a term called process durability assessment. And going to the next page, please, Lee, where we basically create individual. See, we talked about heat maps. Heat maps is step number one. Once you identify through heat maps, where do you want to zoom in and focus on? You start creating at the sub-process level, individual diagnostics on the likelihood of an automation being successful in production. So you look after economic value, you look after qualitative aspects, as well as what we call viability or suitability. You don't wanna scale your automation programs only looking after high complexity automations. So it is important that as part of your automation roadmap, you always have a mix of low, medium, and high complexity automations, because that'll give you your quick wins and that'll give you the opportunity to really scale your program. That's finally, just keep moving and going through the charts. So how discovery works, right? It's setting a baseline. What are those processes that you want to look after? As I mentioned, create individual diagnostics at the sub-process level. Make sure that you always think about not only the financials. It is a very common mistake that we look after only the return on investment of the project. You always want to look at financials first. That is important, but you want to keep in mind the qualitative benefits. There are times where compliance is key, so you want to make sure that compliance is part of what you look after, reducing almost to zero the human errors due to manual intervention, and also adding the viability of your project. Moving to the next, we at Chasey use a survey. Actually, we have a tool that we call diagnostic tool for RPA, where with the questions that are linked to numeric values, there are algorithms behind this tool. You start asking questions. Then Lee, going to the next chart. And this is a typical outcome of an individual diagnostic, where in your blue area, that's where we call the area where automations are going to be able or suitable. And we look after whether there are clear business rules documented. We look at frequency, repetitive. We look after exceptions. We look at how structured the data is, and all combined and with algorithms behind it, you are able to understand if that candidate, right? If that candidate is suitable for automation. Always keep in mind that not all good ideas for automation become successful bots in production. So this process of assessing and evaluating that individual candidate, it's critical for success. As I mentioned, right, 3 aspects that always you need to keep in mind. It's feasibility or viability, and that has a close link to the complexity of the automation, economic value, qualitative benefits, and that's gonna give you a holistic view of not only the individual opportunities, but also in aggregate, how those opportunities rank and compare with each other.
That's what we're showing here.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we cross-refer the feasibility and the qualitative benefits, and the size of the globe here represents the size of the opportunity. Okay, so you figure out what's feasible, what the benefits are, and then scale it as well, so we can invest the time and the money where it's going to give the best return.
Yeah, think about it as it is important that you do the individual diagnostic, but then in aggregate, your scoring model needs to show where do you want to focus on to create a multi-year automation plan. And that's what Imer was referring to, right? The size of the circle is your economic value, right? Qualitative benefits, the more to the right, the more benefits from a qualitative standpoint, the more feasible, right? It's how you place your automation candidate as well in this chart. So those candidates with the larger economic value and located in your upper right section, those are the ones that you want to focus on first. All the previous section, we talked about process. See, we haven't spoken about technology. This is about process. This is a proper discovery through mechanisms and tools that allow you to create your long-term strategic roadmap for automation. Now, you have to enable your process automation with technology. There are multiple vendors, right? Providing RPA software. Most of them have capabilities around different stages or different elements of technology. First one is attended. So attended automation is for very basic automation at the desk level, even many times deployed in the computer of for example, call center agents. Unattended automation starts looking after more of the back office processes, finance, HR, accounting, as we mentioned. Digitized RPA is when you start connecting humans with bots in workflows where humans can trigger actions for the bots, where bots can trigger actions for humans, and where also some of these bots can trigger data and can trigger action for other bots. When you are dealing with unstructured data, or when you are dealing with PDFs or images, you want to think about OCR or IDPs in the way of a machine learning. So training your bots so they can learn about how to process documentation that is not structured. And from an AI standpoint, how do you embed natural process languages engines in your existing chatbots so you can provide, and that's using chatbots is something that we're seeing it's moving more and more as a priority for organizations in the front office to enable sales and to enable clients to buy more from us. All right.
Okay, quite a narrow focus there.
Yeah, so more and more we're seeing digitized RPA. I'm glad to see this. It's a more orchestrated way to drive automation rather than isolated automations scattered all over the organization. Is how you start connecting those automations, just so you start connecting the end-to-end as well.
On that, Chewy, what are your thoughts on the fact that we don't have anybody focusing on machine learning or artificial intelligence at the moment?
I think it's all about use cases, Imer. I think it's almost like an evolving pattern where at the same time you are not seeing lots of attended automation, right? So there's unattended automation, which is the next level, then orchestrator. And when you have the orchestration in place, I'm sure some of the people in the audience are going to start looking after machine learning and artificial intelligence. But I think it's just, this is a natural response, right? So this doesn't surprise me at all, but I'm sure that many of you in the audience, as you go through and evolve your digitized RPA, you're going to start looking after machine learning and artificial intelligence projects as well. I think there's a question from the audience.
Yep. And it is, what's a typical RPA? It's gone. What's a typical RPA journey? What stages does it go through?
Yeah. So the journey, it always starts with a pilot, right? So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the process side, but keep in mind that discovery is important, and as you go and identify your candidates, then you're going to have some level of attended automation for pilots. So typically organizations combine at the beginning of the journey, combine attended and unattended, right? Then the next level after attended and unattended, it's digitized RPA. Digitized RPA is connecting your attended, unattended, but also enabling workflows so they can, so humans can operate with bots with humans, and bots with bots. Machine learning is probably the next one. Machine learning in the form of managing unstructured data, and bots that can be trained automatically. So machine learning is perhaps the next step. Keep in mind that you are not going to use machine learning for all of your use cases. So when you think about journey, don't think about bots. Each and every bot in your organization is going to have machine learning. You're going to have use cases, right? For example, as I mentioned, dealing with unstructured data, some use cases where you are going to need machine learning, not for all, just specific use cases, and then artificial intelligence in the forms of either advanced analytics for decision making, or the most common that we're seeing is the use of natural language processing for advanced chatbots. But it's the core, if you were to look at this from a quantitative perspective, the majority of your automations are going to be driven to unattended. Then second place is going to be attended. And then you're going to have a layer of machine learning and then artificial intelligence.
Okay. Do you need to have end-to-end technology, or does it matter? And would you expect the bot to bridge the gap?
It's very controversial, right? It's very controversial. Why it's controversial? RPA was born due to the unfulfilled promise of ERPs. So ERPs promised 20, 30 years ago that they will automate everything. What it really happened is that ERPs drove a lot of manual work and manual intervention and keystroking, right? So that's where RPA comes into play. Now, we're even seeing projects where interfaces are more expensive than deploying bots. So think about it this way. RPA, due to the time to value, so RPA projects are typically anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks worth of implementation. They could sound and feel like very tactical. They are very inexpensive actually. But if you start adding these tactical automations and you start connecting them to digitized RPA, they become strategic in itself. And of course, you need to have a digital transformation roadmap. But having, for example, a CRM implementation coming into play 1 year from now should not prevent you, right? Should not prevent you using RPA tactically throughout the life cycle. And why I say that? Because normally return on investments or payback in these type of projects are less than 1 year. So anything, right? Anything that it's gonna be 1 year away from now in your strategic technology roadmap, you should cover those gaps and fill those gaps with RPA in the interim. And even in the light of new CRMs or ERPs or HRIS systems coming up, you can always retrain your bots. So adding automations from a tactical perspective, it's not wasting time and it's not wasting money, because you are going to have an automation that can be retrained in the future with a new system that is coming up. So we talked about a lot on unattended, so let's skip this one. Digitized RPA, something that very important that we keep in mind how you want your customer, right? So think about it from a customer perspective. Customer wants to deal with humans. They also are getting more used to dealing with chatbots. How your chatbot can interface with existing automations, either in the form of APIs, pulling information directly from ERPs, and then your chatbot directly on or your automation, dealing with CRMs, dealing with master data, dealing with finance data, statements, bank statements, so you can have a complete flow of information that is going to provide value to clients. We talked about artificial intelligence and machine learning. So technology, Emer, roadmap.
Yes, yeah. Here we're talking about the ways to put this into effect. So things to consider or to act now. So looking at the RPA, adopting a digital mindset, identifying where your talent gaps are, and very importantly, setting up data governance. What is the control of your data? What's the strategic view of your data? So these are things that really you got to start with. In terms of the next step, looking at the plan, we're talking about act, plan, and watch now. Hyper automation we're talking about here with the various subsets of that: machine learning, AI, process mining, etc. We're then talking about talent development to support this and to understand this and allow it to fit into an organization. And that also has an impact on how roles are going to be in the future. We're doing work a different way. We're taking some work away from some people. We're automating it. We're joining elements together. So what does that mean for the roles of people in the future? What's in it for me? We're going to talk about what's in it for me again a little bit later on in this. And things we recommend watching now. Find out more about blockchain, so-called citizen development, citizen developers. Then the other things that we're talking about there: digital assistance, automation for everyone. The citizen development means anybody can do it. That, of course, needs some level of control and direction and guidance, but it's spreading the ability to take advantage of this more widely. And ultimately, we're looking at predictive analytics. Now, there's a whole area there that can be of benefit to people. We've got a client at the moment, large automotive client, who's looking to figure out how to reduce the amount of stock holding he has of expensive products, expensive parts which are not required very often. So there's no real history to work on it. So the way of looking at that as a specific example is to look at predictive analytics. And he is looking to reduce his costs at the same time as improving his service using predictive analytics.
Yeah, and Imer, I think just a couple of points, right? And you hit right on. You talked about talent, right? You need to be ready. Why? This is not about technology. Technology is changing the way we live. Technology is changing the way we operate. So roles are going to change. Roles are changing, transforming. Even post-pandemic, many things have changed in the way we operate. Interestingly enough, one of the things that accelerated automation was the pandemic. So from our client base and from the projects we worked over the last couple of years, we keep hearing from clients that they realize the value of automation in the light of the pandemic.
So I was just going to say that there's also a factor there about experience, customer experience or client experience. Once more automation becomes available and becomes more obvious, we are already having a case of people saying, well, why am I doing that? Why can't that be done by a machine?
Yeah, and we're seeing a trend, Imer, that rather than RPA replacing jobs, RPA is changing jobs. How I get comfortable, right, dealing with automations myself. And furthermore, how my role needs to change in the future so I can be dealing with that level of automation myself as a person. Moreover, and we're going to talk about a little bit of change management in a little bit, but moreover, this is more than that reflection at the individual level. Is how do you have an HR program associated with automation? So HR, right? HR executives more and more have automation in their agenda, not only for automating HR processes, but how do we deal with the employees so we change the mindset and the culture in the teams through time so they get used to automation. They think about automation, they trigger automation. And that's critical, right? If you don't have that change in the mindset, there's no way your citizen development program is gonna fly and it's gonna succeed. Citizen development in itself is very controversial, right? So there's a lot of fear from IT organizations to let go. And let go means giving up the control of the automation program. And what we often tell to our clients, citizen development, it's not black and white. It's not about whether you do it or not, it's how you do it. How you create an orchestrated program with governance that allows you to give away some of your low complexity automations, but at the end allows you and enables your center of excellence to maintain control and visibility and monitoring over those automations that citizen developers are doing. Even from a financial standpoint, Emer, things are changing, right? So when you are dealing with unattended automation, it's very simple to do business cases. It's gonna be 9 to 14 months payback, right? Very quick implementation. You're gonna have your finance, your HR, your accounting automation in the back office. When you are dealing with citizen development, are gonna be low complexity automations. So your first business case at the individual level, Emer doing his first automation, it's not gonna be an amazing payback. So finance mindsets are changing towards, I'm not gonna challenge my employees to give me payback in the first automation. The challenge that I'm gonna be giving to my citizen developers, how do you create a roadmap for me where you are gonna have small incremental automations and you are gonna end up using the license that I gave you more and more through time. So instead of one big unattended automation in the citizen development world, you're gonna be dealing with small incremental automations. And how do you keep employee citizen developers engaged so they go after the second and the third and the fourth? That's the challenge.
We'll talk a little bit about governance and the centers of expertise and how the options there are in a few slides' time. In the meantime, we have a question for you.
And in this particular question, you are not going to have options. So what we would ask you to do is type just words or phrases. What is preventing you to scale your automation program? Interesting. Skills comes on the top, right? Control. Lack of investment. Management, I would assume, is management support as well. It's interesting, the ROI, right? The ROI is critical, right? And as we mentioned during the section, Emer, of discovery, we proper discovery, it's critical. And I know that I'm repeating myself, but now I'm talking about it in the context of business casing. Proper discovery and a proper strategic roadmap needs to come together with a long-term business plan and a long-term business case. And the magic, right? And the beauty of having a multi-year automation roadmap is that it's not set on stone. It's how do you play with different scenarios around 20 automations in your roadmap, which ones you want to target first. How do you aggregate automations in small business cases? Sometimes one automation is going to have its own business case. Sometimes you're going to be dealing with organizations that are not able to do a proper return on investment with one automation. So you want to bring another one for the same organization that together in aggregate may look better from a financial return perspective.
Yeah, I'm a little bit curious about the skills, the thing that really jumps out here, because there's two aspects to that. One is the skills to set up, create the automation, make it run properly. The other could be the skills that are being potentially replaced or automated themselves. We won't get into it now because I don't think we've got the option, but there are two aspects to looking at this at the skills where the issue here.
And what do you think about now, Emer? I'd like to hear your thoughts, right? You've been in business transformation, finance, you've done a lot. So what would you say in your experience you are hearing from a business perspective, finance perspective, as a key stopper in scaling automation programs?
Well, back to that topic of skills there, one of the biggest concerns is losing years of experience, years of judgment, years of knowledge. And I can well see a fear about giving something to a machine that is bits and bytes, yes or no, in basic configuration, and they're taking out the elements of judgment, the elements of understanding, of empathy that people have built up over years. So that plays back to how do you actually, and what you were saying earlier, Chewy, about how do you integrate automation with people, right? Centers of excellence, a way of managing a way of managing and ensuring that there's good control and good understanding and good return from from automation. We've got a central body. We believe is pretty important, the central control. In a slide or two, we're going to talk about the variations on the structure that goes around that, but having a central control, a central governing body over RPA and intelligent automation is pretty important. We talk about some of the stages here again. You're discovering, building, managing, then running it, then engaging, which is designing and implementing a new ecosystem, bringing the people on board, and ultimately measuring. So we can deploy the best returning items. We can undeploy the ones which are not doing what they're required to do. But there has to be a governance structure over why are we doing it, how are we doing it, and once we are doing it, are we getting what we're expecting out of it, and how can we build on from that point forward? So center of excellence, back on the 5 stages that Chewy talked about earlier. That's a central one. So having a center of excellence control over what's happening with automation is pretty fundamental.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at governance, is there a comment or question in the chat?
There was a comment or a question. I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah. So centers of excellence, right? You need to think about this is not a bureaucratic body, right? It's actually a thin layer in the organization that is going to help you drive your automation program. And always when you think about governance in the sense of centers of excellence, it's not about people, right? It's people with the right skills. So that is important. It's about process. What is your intake process, evaluation process, discovery process? How do you go about documenting the right steps in the automation? What are the best practices that need to be driven and put in place from an automation standpoint? What are the rules of engagement for deploying a bot in production? How do you reach out to organizations? How do you capture more ideas? And very important, right? You cannot succeed if you don't measure. So how do you put in place a business intelligence layer on the top of your automation program? And always keep in mind that even for your center of excellence, you need to think about technology in 2 aspects. Not only the technology that you are going to use for automation, meaning the RPA software, but also what's going to be the technology enabler to control your COE. What's going to be your portal for receiving ideas? How those ideas get communicated to management? How those ideas are evaluated? How do you keep track of those ideas? How do you keep track in a single repository from an asset perspective? What are those key assets? Where are those key assets from an automation standpoint that you want to keep stored so they can be reutilized in the future for other automation? So keep in mind that you need people, right skills, process, intake, end-to-end management, and technology enablers as well.
Okay, then we talk about some of the operating models that you can have. You could have a centralized one, which tends to be more the traditional one, where there's often a central IT function, but you can centralize the control of your intelligent automation as well. So you can centralize the expertise. Once you got something to roll out, you can roll it out to one to many very quickly. There are quite frequently issues with prioritization and things getting done on the list, particularly for smaller parts of the organization. So then you move across to the middle one here, where you've got a federated structure where everything is done locally and nothing is, or little is, mandated centrally. So there are definitely advantages to that. The business units can get what they need. They set their own priorities. But the disadvantages is that you can get a high level of variation and incoherence in the approach. You can have essentially the same problem being addressed 5, 6, 10 different ways. But at the same time, you can get a quick response locally. So where that's leading towards is the idea of the hybrid structure, which is trying to get the best out of each. Where big issues, high complexity projects, for example, are managed centrally, but then there's also the flexibility to manage local, smaller requirements or more ad hoc requirements for specific divisions close to the business. So there's still the disadvantage of a high risk of incoherence, but only on the minor projects. If you can make sure the major projects are all aligned, the ones that go across all divisions and all functions, and then you can allow for a little bit more flexibility with the others. And Chewy, which of these are you seeing in practice, or what's the trend with these at the moment?
So two points, Emer, you hit right. 2 points. All of them are in practice. So clients have chosen, organizations have chosen all of them, right? Of course. So we have organizations that decided to go for central, others have decided federated, and someone has decided hybrid. So we see that these models, operating models, have been deployed differently in different organizations. And hey, by the way, these are 3 examples. There are combinations of this model that may create a 4th or a 5th type of model of operating model. Your question on trends, we're seeing that more and more organizations are moving away from the first 2. So still many organizations decided, I'm gonna be central, I'm gonna stay as central. More organizations are deciding to move more towards hybrid. So the one operating model that we see growing, it's hybrid. And this is also very linked to the citizen development section we talked about. In order to properly enable, right, and citizen development, you need to go to a hybrid. So yeah, we're still seeing organizations that decided to stay in the centralized. Fewer decided to stay in the totally decentralized model, but the one that it's growing, keeps growing through time, it's hybrid.
Okay, now talking about the change management, we have the organizational change, and we've got the intelligent automation change itself. So a lot of focus needs to be put on how the work is done, and there's a knock-on effect of what's in it for me. We're going to talk about what's in it for me again in the next slide. Ideally, we're looking for getting business-wide collaboration, so we don't make one part of the business better at the cost to another. And that means looking at the roles and responsibilities, how they hang together, how support is given, how training is given, and of course, maintaining security. There are security requirements, setting the policies, managing the policies. Communication to key employees and getting them to accept is very important and heavily dependent on a proof of benefit. What is the benefit? How does it work? How does it help the business? How does it help the people? Then moving to the risk side of this, we need to focus on the governance and the compliance. Without that, you risk just a loss of control. It will need close collaboration with IT, but that's not the same as having it run by IT or automation being an IT project. That's a fundamental thing. It's not necessarily IT, but there has got to be close collaboration, certainly not any form of competition. So we can understand the impacts properly. Get the licensing right, get the equipment right, give it a better chance of working. The last point we put in there is about being transparent about how to solve for any changes and make any adjustments to the underlying applications or the infrastructure, making sure that it's clearly understood so changes can be made as required. And if we go on, I said, what's in it for me? One of the big questions, the biggest question, I think, with transformation of any kind, what's in it for me? Everything goes fine until somebody says, what's in it for me? So, that means identifying who to deal with. So who are the stakeholders that we need to manage and deal with? What is their current level of interest and support? How can we adjust that? How do we need to address that? And then what information do they need? What communication do they want? What communication do they feel are lacking? And part of that is assessing what their influence is over the final outcome. In terms of the communication, the 3 C's: communication, consultation, collaboration. So what's the message? And then what's the nature of the communication? Is it consultation, as in, we'd like your input, but we have a decision to make, or is it completely collaborative, where no communication is made until the collaboration is complete? So that's what we call the 3 C's of RPA communication. And then an employee engagement plan. Again, what's the question? The purpose of the program is to answer the question, what's in it for me? Okay. Then understand how people are feeling and perceiving. And we said people. The emphasis at the bottom there is not what management assumes or thinks. And we have done surveys. We've done the real life surveys where there can be a dramatic difference between what middle and senior management think versus the people who are doing the job. So sometimes to the point of being amusing and worrying at the same time. Okay, so it's important to know what the people are feeling and not just what the management assumption is. And then the last point in the bottom right there, Chewy mentioned this before, but making the bots more interlinked with the people who are using them, or the roles that are linked to the bots.
Okay. Emer, you touched on the very important point, right? And you spend a lot of time talking about employee engagement. If your employees are not convinced, if you're not able to have a proper change management plan, helping them to transition from the old to the new, to the not automated to an automated world, if employees are not engaged and committed, your program is not going to succeed. And taking in consideration their fears, taking in consideration how they're perceiving RPA. Even we found that simple things, Emer, like putting names to bots, it's helping humans to create those type of connection. It may seem a little bit silly, but it's not. Creating names to the automations and putting names to automations are creating that connection with the organization, with the employees.
Yeah, and unlike other forms of transformation where you've got work going people to people, in that scenario, the people who are the recipients can adjust and react and fill gaps. Whereas if you're giving it to a machine, even with a nice name, the machine still doesn't have that it cannot exist, the same level of empathy, understanding, or willingness to just change and make it happen. It needs to be driven. Right.
Yeah. Bots break, guys. Bots break. You want to make sure that you always think about not only how you're discovering, how you're developing, how you're saving your assets for reusable assets for the future. How are you deploying with production, and how are you teaming up with IT and with the business? But you need to have a proper maintenance and support team, right? What we call in Chasey, your intelligent automation control tower. So who's going to look after monitoring bots, right? So how do you orchestrate automations? How do you monitor them? What are the key KPIs from a business and operational perspective? License usage, downtimes, number of errors in the bots, dealing with change, right? So software updates happen all the time. Updates to ERPs, cleaning database, many things happen. And as automations more and more are connected to all of your key enterprise systems, it is important that your control tower becomes part of your change management process within IT. Just so when something changes, even the update in a browser, even changing a browser may stop your bots in production. So keep in mind that control tower, support and maintenance, it's critical to success as well.
Right, what we have after this is a checklist, but actually what we should check is if you've got any questions or comments or additional pieces of information which would be of benefit to you. We'd love to know that. In the meantime, we just got a checklist of some of the key things to think about here. The why, what, when, the level of engagement we get, the transformation. By that we mean don't just automate a bad process. If there's a way of improving it, transform it as you go. Look at the operating model, particularly the governance structure. Chewy mentioned very early on about suitability. Some things don't make sense to try and automate. There needs to be an assessment early on of that, and make sure that the compatibility is accessible. But again, these are things we recommend putting on a checklist. But would appreciate any thoughts, questions, comments from the members of the audience.
Great, Emer. It was great sharing with you. I think key takeaways. It doesn't matter where you are in your journey. It is a journey. RPA is not a destination, and don't stop in RPA. Go RPA and beyond. Hyperautomation is the way to go.
So there you have those two handsome chaps again. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time. Please feel free to contact us with additional comments, questions, any more inputs. Hopefully we've generated some questions in your own minds, as well as giving you some information about what we've seen, working in the industry. But hopefully we've generated some questions, and if you have them, please feel free to let us know, and we'll take it further.
Right. Thanks, Emer.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.